Hola muchachos, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Aquí tienen el horario para hoy, martes, el 12 de abril. No homework was due for today, and you don't have any homework due on next class or for next class. Our learning targets are to continue talking about what we were like when we were younger, talking about the toys you used to like to play with, your favorite classes, extracurricular activities, and then to utilize that vocabulary to communicate interpersonally with one another, talking about what you were like as a child. And then also expressing habitual actions in the past by using the imperfect. We're not really going to get into that so much today. That'll be our agenda for next class, or our objective for next class. Your warm-up questions are using the key vocabulary that we've gone over so far this week, talking about your childhood, página 186. You have toys and animals that we used to like to play with, and then some of the key vocabulary in terms of where we used to play and the activities we used to engage in and our behavior, and some descriptive adjectives as well. So continuing to use that vocabulary, and remember, these warm-up questions are the questions that you will have for your project that we'll talk more about next class. For today's warm-up, share what used to be your favorite subject in school and why, and what extracurricular activities you used to participate in using the imperfect. So you have two questions for today. The first, de niño, de niña, ¿qué era tu materia favorita en la primaria y por qué? So this question is asking what used to be, or what was your favorite subject in elementary school and why? So, por ejemplo, de niño, mi materia favorita en la primaria era la historia, porque leíamos mucho y era muy interesante. So, for your response, you can essentially use this model. You're just going to replace la historia with your favorite class. You're going to replace leíamos with another verb. You can leave that verb in the infinitive because we haven't gotten into how to conjugate in the imperfect yet. So, for example, you could just put leer or escribir or dibujar, whatever verb you would associate with that class. And then finally, the descriptive adjective that you would use to describe that class. So, take that model and replace the subject, the verb, and the adjective with whatever vocabulary that pertains to your childhood. Second question, de pequeño, de pequeña, ¿en qué participabas después de la escuela? So this question is asking, what did you used to participate in after school? What extracurricular activities, sports, hobbies, games, etc.? Por ejemplo, de pequeño yo participaba en la natación, el béisbol, el fútbol y en los niños exploradores. So I used to participate in swimming, baseball, soccer, and Boy Scouts. So you can essentially use the same beginning, or you could replace the verb participar with another verb. The verb practicar, bailar, jugar, practicar, any of those verbs would work. Or you can indicate the actual activity itself. You can look at the extracurricular vocabulary we reviewed at the beginning of the year in Chapter 1B. I want to say pages 42 or 43 of the textbook. And for the rest of class, we're going to do a few partner activities together, exercises 4 and 5 on page 190, and exercises 7 and 8 and 10 on pages 191 and 192. We may not be able to get to all of these. We won't be able to get to all of these due to the testing schedule, so we'll do as much as we can. But let's go ahead and take a look at each of these, beginning with 4 and 5 on page 190. And again, you're going to be using the key vocabulary at the beginning of the chapter. to indicate the toys and the animals that you used to have and play with when you were little. And then describing the characteristics of yourself and of others that are outlined there on page 187, some of them. Travieso, generoso. Traviesa means mischievous or mischievous. Yeah. Generoso would be generous. That's a cognate. So let's take a look at exercise 4. You have 6 different toys or animals. And so you can take a look at the model. Essentially, you're just indicating whether or not you had these animals or items, toys, as a little one. And then if so, how many you had, or you can just say a lot of, indicating whether or not you had these as a kid. Por ejemplo, yo tenía un gato cuando era niño. I had a cat when I was little. Cat en español, gato. Tenía muchos gatos cuando era niño. I had a lot of cats when I was little. Or you could change muchos and put an actual number, like tenía 4 gatos cuando era niño. If you didn't have that toy or that animal, you're going to respond by saying no tenía un gato cuando era niño. These key vocabulary terms are on page 186. For example, number 1 would be pez. And you're just going to replace un pez with replace un gato with un pez. Tenía un pez. Cuando era niño. Yo tenía muchos peces cuando era niño. No tenía un pez cuando era niño. And the same thing for la muñeca, el tren eléctrico, el oso de peluche, la tortuga, and el triciclo. All of those vocabulary terms can be found on page 186. For exercise 5, you're not going to write anything if you feel like you don't need to. It's a dialogue, and it's going to look and sound a lot like this.
Yo tenía un gato cuando era niño. ¿Y tú? ¿Tenías un gato? Sí, yo tenía un gato también.
So basically, you're sharing your response with your partner for exercise 4. Yo tenía un gato cuando era niño. And then you're going to ask them, ¿y tú? And you? ¿Tenías un gato? Did you have a cat? And they're basically going to share their response for exercise 4. So it's a conversation in which you are sharing your responses to numbers 1 through 6 for exercise 4. Following that model, just replacing un gato with the toy or animal. Exercise 7 and 8, I don't think we're going to have time to get to in class, unfortunately. You can take a look at the model and the examples to use for your own edification. I don't think we'll be able to, unfortunately. But exercise 10 I do want to go over with you. Here you have a word bank to highlight different adjectives to describe what kids are like. Bien educado is well behaved. Desobediente, obediente, generoso, and tímido are all cognates. Disobedient, obedient, generous, and timid or shy. Travieso means mischievous. So you're going to take a look at these 5 descriptions and pick an adjective that you think best describes each person. Los padres de Carlota le compran cada juguete que pide. Carlota's parents buy her every toy that she asks for. Carlota es consentida. She is conceited. So pick the adjective that best describes each person. Antonio tiene miedo de hablar con otras personas. Antonio is scared of talking with other people. Antonio es tímida.